On this episode of Fired Up.
You would think that the United States government might learn something from all the shootings and the killings at Fort Hood.
And I got to agree, that's over the top.
What I was attempting to do was draw and fire from defensive retention.
This is the 1938 Italian Carcano.
Our panelists include Emily Miller, Marketing Director from the Gun Store in Las Vegas, Michael Giles, retired police officer and defense attorney from Creed and Giles, Tony D., retired police officer and firearms instructor from the Gun Store, Lieutenant Randy Sutton, retired policeman and author, and your host, Bob Irwin from the Gun Store.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to Fired Up. I'm Bob Irwin. I'll be your host for the show from the Gun Store in Las Vegas, Nevada. This program is all about guns, politics, and self-defense. The panel segments today, we have a raft of things going on in this show. The panel segments are going to be our comments on the mass shooting recently at the D.C. Navy Yard. A little bit about apparently Starbucks has decided that they probably don't want gun owners, or maybe they do, or maybe, and a section on why it is reasonable and practical for everybody who's allowed to carry a defensive firearm. We're going to start off today by talking about the mass shooting at the Navy Yard. You're all aware, basically, by this point of what happened there. We had another mentally ill gunman show up somewhere and open up on people who were not his enemy, just randomly shooting. Apparently a few of them were coworkers, but the rest of them were just targets. We've seen the same pattern over and over of someone who is mentally unbalanced, who gave lots of warning signs to various government agencies, who still finds a gun-free zone to carry out his attack. Randy, I'm going to let you go first on this one, and
I'll be happy to go first. You would think that the United States government might learn something from all the shootings and the killings at Fort Hood, when the terrorist psychiatrist killed all those military servicemen who had no weapons on them. Now, that was several years ago, and still at the Navy Yard, we have almost an identical set of circumstances. We have military personnel who aren't allowed to carry guns on the military installation. And as a result, they are defenseless when this madman, who has a security clearance, by the way, a top secret security clearance, goes in there and murders them with a shotgun. And it's mind-boggling that the government can't even react to the deaths that already occurred and make a correction.
The thing about the Navy Yard is, like a lot of military installations, a lot of governmental installations, they rely on the entry point security system. If you can get past that, there's very few firearms actually on there. He was in one of the more secure buildings, but they rely on keypads and pass cards. I talked to a couple of my friends who have worked on the Navy Yard in various capacities over the years, and they said, yeah, once you get in there, it's all suits. They're all tech people, they're projects, they're designing things in that portion of the yard. And of course, the Navy refers to all these buildings as ships. And so they, crazy enough, but there's no shore patrol in there. The first two individuals, apparently, the first individual for sure that he ran into that was armed, he ambushed and he took their handgun. There's now a video out showing his movements through, and clearly he knew he was moving, tactically is not quite the right word, but he was sneaking, certainly.
Well, he was a military, he was a naval officer in the reserves.
He was, but he wasn't a combat weapons individual. He was a tech guy. But that doesn't change the fact that if you're in an area that is highly dense with people and not armed people, you're going to get to shoot a lot until somebody shows up. And ultimately, one of the individuals he shot and wounded is the person who probably stopped him. Now, of course, the media immediately jumped on this because there was a report. As it was going on, there was a report, man standing up on the balcony with an AR-15.
Right.
Yeah. Of course, CNN didn't let that get in the way. It was an AR-15 shotgun by the time they were done.
And it was an AK-47 on Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
And Piers Morgan said it was an AK-47. The narrative has slowed down some now, but they're calling for Dianne Feinstein. They hadn't even cleaned the scene yet, for she's calling for another assault weapons ban. It was a Remington 870 shotgun.
It was an 870 shotgun. The guy cut an extended tube on it. He cut the barrel to about where the mag tube ended, and then he cut the stock off, obviously to hide it, to get it into the bag. And the first thing I heard on television, AR-15, the magic words. Then the AK-47 with Piers Morgan. But it was an 870. And then he scrawled his scrawlings on the side of the gun as his message. And then he killed him. I mean, if you're going to, in a building like that, with that particular type of weapon, that would be an ideal choice. I mean, obviously, the shotgun. Yeah.
Clearly, the tool's not the problem here. This individual was disturbed, no question about it.
He
left a suicide note.
Low resonance microwave.
He claimed he'd been bombarded by ultra low frequency radiation, and this was his response.
Now, all of that is interesting, and the misnaming of the gun is typical of the government, that he had this bad gun, we got to get rid of that bad gun. The fact is that even if a few of the 3,000 naval personnel and high-level civilians, naval officers that were in that building at the time had been armed, it would have stopped right there. Every time there's been one of these mass shooters, as soon as they're confronted, they either get shot dead or they surrender immediately. And there was no one in the building after the thing we had at the IHOP here in Reno, if you remember that. Disarmed soldiers at Fort Hood, and we're still disarming.
There's a lot of debate over when and where administrations started taking away the arms of military personnel while they're on duty. That's not really relevant because every administration can reverse the prior administration's policy. So where it started is not important. Currently, the men and women in service, whether they're active duty, on duty at the time, cannot carry firearms that are loaded. There's a few security officers at the gates, a few others that have it, shore patrol, the police force. There's a report today that the Commandant of the Marine Corps has said he's going to try and reverse that. He wants there to be no more of these, at least on Marine Corps facilities. The Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, so he has to go through SecNav and the President. But let's remember, this is the administration who at the last inaugural had the United States Marine Corps Guard, some of the most highly trained individuals on the planet whose barracks are right down the street at 8th and I. They took the bolts out of their M14 rifles. No one knows why.
Just the parade rifles, besides.
Parade
rifles. You know, give me a break. I mean,
this is also the same administration who, when they took control and they started sending individuals into the combat zone, the green zone is the green zone, but the war zone is just over the fence. And these people were coming to listen to the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense and other individuals talk to them. They made them take their weapons and stack them outside under guard. They couldn't enter the tent where the speech was going on with a rifle. Now you contrast that with the prior administration, you see guys walking around with rifles and handguns. There's a level of trust there and a level of belief in our men and women in military. It's just unbelievable that they would disarm.
So how many of our military are going to get killed before we let the armed forces have arms? This is the stupidest. We're going to have to break for commercials here in a second, but I'd love to go on with this. We got to break into other things, but hopefully this Commandant of the Marine Corps, James Amos, will get it on and start arming Marines wherever they are on duty. We'll be right back.
More discussion on guns, politics, and self-defense when we come back on Fired Up.
But the walk-in BDUs with an AR, with all the little soccer moms and their little children there, I can understand how that may be a little deterrent to business.
Who really cares what he says? You can go, as long as you have your gun concealed, he's not going to know it, nor is anybody else going to know it.
Welcome back to Fired Up. Last week, the CEO of Starbucks, a guy named Howard Schultz, kind of put a foot in his mouth by backing up on a gun thing they had going. They wanted to allow people to carry their guns into Starbucks. Now they decided, well, they still can, but they probably shouldn't because as he put it, Starbucks is where people get together to enjoy peace and pleasure of coffee and community. So he asked the people that own guns not to go to Starbucks, but if you go to Starbucks, he'll serve you anyway. It's kind of like a mishmash.
So you're sitting in Starbucks having your latte, and some bad guy comes in and holds the place up. Mr. Schultz would just rather you die quietly, so not to disturb the ambiance of the community feeling of Starbucks.
Yeah, they already got your $9 for your cappuccino out of you, so whatever.
And just
They don't care.
just die quietly.
I've never felt peaceful spending that kind of money on coffee anyway.
Calm time, right?
Yeah,
Quiet
right.
time.
Okay.
So
Unbelievable.
I don't understand, like, so you're supposed to just sit there, and if somebody comes in to steal my purse, I'm just gonna finish ordering my, exponentially expensive cup of burnt coffee. Sorry, I'll take a stance on that right now. It's a little too bitter for me. And then just wait until the guy like comes in and takes my purse. I should have to pay them first prior to him stealing my purse from me. I don't understand this. Are they going to call the cops?
well, maybe they'll comp your coffee if the purse disappears before you can actually pay.
I have no ride home, but I get a free
Who
cup.
really cares what he says? You can go, as long as you have your gun concealed, he's not going to know it, nor is anybody else going to
This
know it.
actually
You
is
can get
based
it
around the
concealed.
open carry. What really happened, and all kidding aside, what happened was there was an anti-gun movement that tried to coerce, lack of a better word, Starbucks into becoming gun-free zones, really gun-free zones in every jurisdiction. Put up the sign that says no firearms allowed, we won't serve you. The CEO, quite wisely in my opinion, issued a letter saying we're going to follow the laws of the state. If it's legal there, unfortunately,
He should have left it right there.
some folks in the open carry movement who are a little more radical than I personally would be took that as we can carry anything that's legal into the store, and they started organizing these Starbucks Appreciation Days. Now, when Starbucks Appreciation Day first started, it was go in and thank them for their stance. I don't drink coffee, but there's a Starbucks on the way to and from court, and I would swing in there and I would get one of their $3 bottles of water that I don't know where it comes from.
Wonderful water.
Probably from the tap, right? And they do have some nice little lemon cakes that I like. I'd get a lemon cake and a water, and I would always say to the manager, I want to thank you for your stance on the Second Amendment. And the manager at that local Starbucks always said, oh, thanks, we get a lot of that. Well, there were some Starbucks that were overrun by individuals carrying ARs and AKs and shotguns, and
And I got to agree, that's over the top. That is definitely over the top. I mean, if you walk in, say you didn't have your jacket on and your gun was exposed, you went in for a cup of coffee, that's one thing. But to walk in BDUs with an AR, with all the little soccer moms and their little children there, I can understand how that may be a little deterrent to business.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
And they were trying to make a point by getting business for Starbucks, but the problem is Starbucks caters to everybody. And so while I don't generally go in there, I won't go in anymore because of the new policy, but I suspect there'll be some blowback from the other side too.
Guess we're going to see who drinks the most coffee, the gun
Well,
or the
I
anti-gun.
think they're going to lose everybody because the gun side seems to be saying, well, now they've said if you come into a Starbucks, we really don't want you here because it upsets the ambiance. So the anti-gun people are going to say, well, they're letting gun guys go there, so we're not going to go there. I think he's going to lose both sides.
I'll
in
bet
this
you that it doesn't make one bit
marketing.
of difference to anybody as far as their bottom line goes. I would venture to bet right now that there won't be a blip on their radar about this controversy, because when it comes down to it, if you want a cup of coffee, you're going into the Starbucks.
Or the one right up the street that ain't a Starbucks.
They're kind of ubiquitous. They're all over the place. But a blogger who blogs out of Indianapolis, she works in the gun industry. Her name is Tam. She put up an interesting post after this came out. She said, look, I can go down the street to a real bohemian coffee shop and pay half the money and get the real bohemian experience that Starbucks is trying to create in corporate style. And I think, honestly, from our side of the fence, the gun people, that'll be what happens. Starbucks may actually see a blip because they announced after the first appreciation started that they actually increased business in certain jurisdictions or locations from the people who were gun people.
Okay, more people in Alabama went to Starbucks.
Probably
That's all.
true. Instead of going to the McDonald's and getting the 50-cent coffee, they went to the...
Which is better, by the
Well,
way.
I will believe the coffee drinkers as far as that goes, but this is one of those places where I think the company tried to walk the fine line between taking a stance, and I think you probably should have just stayed out of this.
Exactly. Should have stayed out of it completely. Why is there politics involved with coffee?
Why do they have a policy on guns? I mean,
It's real.
Stay home, make your own coffee, and either wear your gun or don't. There. It saves everybody.
It kind of reminds me of the debate with guns, CCWs on college campuses. You always hear somebody will come and say, well, it's going to stifle creativity, it's going to stifle open expression.
Concealed.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So basically what you're telling me is, in the academic setting, you feel free to say anything you want unless you think somebody's armed there and they might take offense to it. Kind of the same thing going on here. You know, our ambiance will be destroyed if there's a gun there. There was another lady who was an anti-gun person who wrote a series of articles about how she went and bought a firearm with no training and carried it. Didn't kill anybody. The gun didn't jump out of her purse and shoot anybody. But she made a big deal out of this. Oh, I was in a Starbucks with a gun and I felt horrible about it. Well, then don't go. You know? Seriously, it's priceless.
Marketing-wise, not that they've made a stance either way, there's going to be some blowback. And I know you think it's not going to matter all in all, but the people that aren't armed in the Starbucks, I don't think they're going to walk in and be like, look at all the guns I don't have on. We probably could have played it cooler. The gun people, not we, but the more radical ones, just could have played it a little cooler, but now it is what it is, and we'll see how
What
this
I'm
shakes out
saying
for 'em.
is that okay, there was some publicity, and there'll be some controversy about it now. Nobody will remember it a month from now.
That's probably true. If somebody doesn't do something to keep it in the news, either
Well,
Starbucks or
hopefully
the
somebody
Well,
was-
there's a rash of armed robberies at Starbucks
and
now.
and that's
then,
really that's really the way this comes back in.
Yeah.
A Starbucks has a high-profile incident, either where a CCW holder stops it, or somebody goes, you know, last week I would have had a gun here,
Well,
and I could have stopped that.
Starbucks can they'll be fine. They have their pumpkin spice latte, which is all anyone cares about these days. So I'm pretty sure
Is it the
fall
season?
season will go ahead and take care of this little gun issue. We'll be fine.
We'll be back with our final panel of the morning. Thanks for staying tuned.
We'll have more Fired Up when we come back.
We are back. With me is Mitch, who runs the Rocky Mountain Gun Shows. We're his guests here filming some of the displays. This is an amazing show. It's
Thank you.
In
Thank
the middle
you.
of this wonderful hotel. It's gorgeous, and it's it's just terrific. How long have you been doing these in Las Vegas? Long time.
You know, this is actually our 4-year anniversary. This month is our 4-year anniversary for the Rocky Mountain Gun Show. And we've been doing them here at South Point the whole time. The South Point Casino's been wonderful to us. It's a great facility. So we're real happy to be here. We get a great turnout.
Yeah, I can see that. And this is the second day, and the place is packed.
Yeah,
It's,
yes.
the vendors seem to be
We've
happy.
got awesome vendor support, a lot of big vendors that follow us around. We do our best to keep them happy, and you know, we kind of pride ourselves on the advertising we do for our show. We do a ton of advertising, from billboards to radio, TV.
Well, you're about to have some more, apparently.
Yeah, and you know, just we really try to do a lot of advertising to, you know, to bring the people in for our vendors.
Well, it's just part of the gun industry. It's so nice to have this here because it creates a lot of interest in firearms, and the more
Sure.
publicity we all have, the better
Sure.
off we do.
We also offer a CCW class here, so and that's a nice for the public, you know, to come in, and I think everybody should have their concealed weapons permit.
I couldn't agree more. You even have the ATF here.
Yep, the
answering
ATF
questions
is,
for people.
you know what, they've been very supportive of us. They compliment us on a show well run. They compliment us on being strict with our rules. You know, we try to follow the letter of the law as best we can, and make everybody happy, do what we're supposed to do, and
Well, I appreciate
Everybody
your,
can have the
your
ga-
putting the show on, and I appreciate you letting us in to film it as part of our show.
absolutely, we love. Thanks for
And,
coming.
It's it's good for everybody. Anyway,
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much.
All
Thank
righty.
you very much.
Thank
Mitch.
you.
Appreciate it.
Nice meeting you.
We are here at the Rocky Mountain Show with the NRA booth. Maggie is currently running, and I know we've talked about people joining the NRA and give me a couple of minutes as to why they should or we should go beat them up if they don't.
Well, one of the major reasons why we do want to affiliate ourselves with the NRA is because the NRA has our best interest at heart. We firearms owners protecting not only our Second Amendment but all of our civil liberties. Joining the NRA, you also get updated with magazines on a monthly. You'll get a monthly issue subscription. You can actually get the American Rifleman. You can also get the America's First Freedom. They also have a great hunting magazine. They'll keep hunters updated on the latest and greatest rifles and ammunition that are out there. Also joining the NRA, you get a lot of coverage for your firearms. You get $2,500 worth of firearms care in the event that your firearms are ever lost, stolen, or burnt in a fire. We also have $5,000 worth of disability in the event that you accidentally shoot your foot off. $5,000 worth of disability will actually go towards your medical expenses. Not only being a part of the NRA is a huge privilege. With that privilege comes great responsibility, and the NRA does hold great responsibility for our firearms. You know, being able to conceal carry or open carry, states are different. But the NRA is pro-firearm for self-defense, and then also for hunting, also for recreational. We actually do a lot of recreational shooting through the NRA. I'm an NRA certified firearm safety instructor as well. Being a part of the NRA has really changed my life and has really changed the lives of Americans being able to have their Second Amendment protected.
And if you're out there watching Fired Up and you are not an NRA member, you need to be. We're going to put a crawl on the bottom of here to show you where to contact them to join. And if you value your gun rights, you need to be a member. We'll be right back.
Hello and welcome back to Fired Up with Bob. We're going to take some viewer questions. This viewer would like to know, what is the best all-around 45?
Every manufacturer seems to have a different idea of what that is. For a carry gun, I would recommend the Glock series as being the smallest. 45s, they have concealed hammers and so forth so they don't snag. The people that carry 1911s love them because they're 1911s, and if you practice with them and shoot them all the time, they're fine. Some of those now come with shorter hammers or flat hammers so they don't catch on your clothing. It really is purely a matter of taste. All of the major brands work generally flawlessly if they're fed good ammunition made by a major manufacturer, not somebody's reloads. I would really not try to push one over the other. It's what gun feels the best in your hand to you. Which one points better for you, is more comfortable to carry for the size of your hand, where you're going to carry it on your body is how you pick it up. There really isn't a best one for everybody, or there'd only be one gun.
Our next viewer asks, if you buy ammo online, do they have to mail it to an FFL, or can they mail it to you?
Yes, they can mail it to you or ship it to you. We had a question on another show about that. And it's difficult to mail ammunition because it's considered an explosive by the post office, although it really doesn't explode. But the fact of shipping interstate is okay at the moment. We've got some states that are starting to restrict that. California is about to put a law through that will restrict that. They're going to have a law that says you can only buy it from a dealer and have to do your fingerprints to buy ammunition. As silly as that sounds, but that's about to be the law over there, I believe. So it depends on the state you're in. In the Wild West, generally you can send ammunition, but by truck, by ground shipping of some sort. But again, not in all the East Coast, New England in particular, they have some laws against it. Call a gun dealer in that state, they can tell you what the law is.
Our next question comes from Aaron, who says, I have a handgun and younger children in the house. Where is the best place for me to store my gun and still keep it readily available? Which is a common question that we get.
Yeah, and the common answer is you keep it in a safe in a locked box that takes some type of combination to get the gun out. If you're going to leave the gun in loaded, it needs to be with little children and their children's friends and their friends' friends. It needs to be locked. So there are a number of companies making the little one-gun safes that you open with a combination touch of your fingers, or if it's several digits with a dial on it that you push like a push-button telephone, and you remember that your combination is 347, you can punch that pretty well in the dark even, because you know where the buttons are on your dial. You can get that gun almost instantly, and they are about 100% from your children getting the gun when you're not there. Really recommend the electronic safes with a combination for your fingers. If you're very wealthy, they make safes that will read your fingerprint. When you stick your fingerprint in the little slot, it'll read your fingerprint and open the safe. Those are $500-600 just for that unit that reads your print. But the finger combinations are only a shade of a second slower, and they're secure from children. Spend your money on one of those. The tragedy is not worth saving the money.
How do you know if your state CCW is honored in another state?
You call and ask, or
Not us.
not us. But in order to keep up, there is a website called handgunlaw.us. And it is the most up-to-date I've found. There's several places that keep those. The NRA has a list, usually on their website someplace. That one website, though, handgunlaw.us, keeps up almost on a daily basis. And it's not just the 50 states, because it'll vary in some of the counties and so forth, and some cities. So that's the place you go look, and it'll tell you what the law is this week. And if you don't travel till next week, you probably want to check again. Lots of them are changing every day.
What is the grain count on bullets, and what is the difference between, say, like a 180 grain versus 220 grain, 45?
The grains is a measurement of weight, and we use it in lead in bullets. 1 grain is 1/7,000th of a pound. Try to say that fast 3 times. So the heavier bullets, when you say you're going from a 200 grain bullet in your gun to a 225 grain bullet, that is only increasing the weight 25/7,000th of a pound. It's not a huge change. It makes a great deal of difference ballistically, because the bullet would generally be faster with the lighter grain bullet and slower with the heavy grain bullet. You get more penetration with the heavier bullets usually. So you see those used on dangerous game. They use very heavy bullets on rhinoceri and so forth. On people, we're built pretty light, so the type of bullet really doesn't matter. They're all fairly effective on people.
What is the best AR-15? Obviously one we see here.
Lots of major brands that are very, very good. There's some that are more expensive that are very good. They're in very short supply. I would recommend anything made by Colt or Smith & Wesson. Rock Island makes great ARs. There's any number of brands that are good. Generally, they're $100 more than the cheap ones. Again, ask your dealer when you go to see one which one is the more robust. They're all going to last a long time. The only ones I would technically stay away from, because we've seen so many failures, are a number of brands, but it's not the brand, it's the type, where the AR receiver, the receiver itself is made out of plastic. They're trying to make a Glock out of an AR. Glocks have steel linings, the receivers on the ARs don't, and we've seen those split several times with very little wear. I would get an aluminum receiver and a high quality aluminum receiver and go from there.
Our next question asks, if I go to a gun show in another state, can I buy a gun there and bring it back with me?
Yes and no. Yes, if it's a long gun, a rifle or shotgun. If it's a handgun, no. It would have to be shipped to a dealer in the state you live in, and the guy selling it at the gun show, the company selling it, would arrange to do that, to ship it to a license holder in the state that you live in. And even when I say that you can buy rifles interstate and not handguns, there are exceptions to that in some of the states that restrict guns even more. That would not apply to if you live in California and ship a gun and buy a gun out of California. You can't do that and ship it into California. They have a mandatory 10-day waiting period and various other laws that would violate. They can only be brought into that state by certain dealers who are licensed to import. And some of the states on the East Coast do the same thing. In some places, the guns are flat illegal, so you can't bring them in. City of Chicago has those types of laws. New York City has those types of laws. You need to go to a gun dealer and make sure that the gun you buy is legal in the state you live in, because it may not be. You may not be able to import it into that state.
Well, that's going to end our question segment. If you have anything that you'd like to ask Bob or any of our other panelists, please write us at questions@firedupwithbob.com. Thanks for watching.
Today's historical firearm is infamous. This is the 1938 short rifle, Italian Carcano. This is the rifle that was used to assassinate President John Kennedy. Hi, this is Tony D from the gun store in Las Vegas. Today's historical firearm is infamous. This is the 1938 short rifle, Italian Carcano. This was the rifle that was used to assassinate President John Kennedy. This particular example here, 1938, the Italians went to a shorter rifle, battle rifle. They were changing calibers over from 6.5 Carcano to 7.35 Carcano. However, the war started and then they decided not to do that, so they went back and started making the 6.5 Carcano again. This particular model was made by 3 different companies, arsenals. This is the Turney one. It was also made by Beretta, and it was also made by FNA Brescia. This is a 6-shot repeating rifle, fixed sights, and it was the Italian rifles got a lot of bad press. They said that they weren't very accurate and they were poorly made. And I could attest that that's not very true. This gun is finely made, is as strong as any other gun on the market. And saying it wasn't accurate, the ranges that Oswald shot Kennedy were very close. People don't realize the first shot was under 60 yards. The second shot was about 66 yards, and the third shot was about 88 yards. Very, very simple shots to make. If you were up at Dallas and looked out that window at the school book depository, you could see that they were quite close. This rifle was absolutely capable of making those shots, and a good rifleman with practice could get the rounds off in the time limit that he did. In fact, here we did a competition and we set up the scenario with the 3 targets at that range, and out of 24 guys shooting, we got about 19 of them hit the target 3 times, where Oswald only got 2 hits on a target, and the rest of the guys did get 2 hits. So it can be done. It could have been done, and it was very, very easy to do by someone trained. This rifle here is from the exact arsenal that Oswald's came from. This one was in 1941. Oswald's was built in 1940. And again, this has the fascist date of 19 on it, which stands for the year of the fascist regime. It is stamped here with the caliber designation 6.5 and the serial number here. The ammunition comes in a 6-round clip. You insert it into the gun, and as you fire your 6th round, the empty clip will come out the bottom of the gun. Oswald used ammunition that was made by Winchester in the United States. This is probably the best Carcano ammunition that was ever produced for that rifle. And this has an interesting history too. President Kennedy contracted Winchester to make this ammunition for the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba. When we were going to oust Castro, they gave them Carcano rifles, and 3 million rounds of this ammunition was made by Winchester for that. Of course, the Bay of Pigs invasion never took place, so the ammo was surplused out. This is probably the most accurate ammo that could be used in a Carcano, and it came in 3 different lots, and this is the 6001 is the first lot that was made. The ammunition is quite collectible by the conspirators and Kennedy archives, and a good box of this stuff will sell for over $200. We're going to shoot the gun today, and our distances aren't going to be like the Kennedy assassination, but we're going to try it from a little bit closer indoors, of course without the telescopic sight. So we'll get started and get ready. All right, to load the gun, you insert the full clip into the rifle, push it all the way down until it snaps into place, chamber the rifle, and we're ready to go.
What I was attempting to do was draw and fire from defensive retention.
I'm Mike Rogers. Welcome to this segment of Moron of the Week. Enjoy.
Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here, Tex Grebner Outdoors. I'm not making this video for sympathy, and I'm not making it to be ridiculed. I experienced a negligent discharge of my Kimber Pro Carry 2 1911 45 ACP. As you see, I'm wearing a hospital bracelet. The footage that I'm about to show you is what actually happened. I just f***ing shot myself. Oh, son of a bitch, I just shot my... How did that happen? Earlier in the day, I had been practicing with my 511 thumb drive holster. The 511 thumb drive has a thumb-driven retention mechanism. What I was attempting to do was draw and fire from defensive retention. However, I had done this multiple times with my 511 thumb drive earlier that day with my Glock. The 511 thumb drive is in the actual same position as the safety on my Kimber. As in, when I went to draw my pistol, I pushed down and took off the safety. Then I pulled up. The gun did not release because I had not engaged the mechanism on the index mechanism. And so as I pulled up, I hit that, my finger curled into the trigger guard, and I ripped around through my leg. This is not something that I blame on the holster. I blame it purely on me. However, I share it with you because gun safety is everybody's business. The Full Metal Jacket 45 entered my body here and traveled down to my knee and exited. I was very lucky that I was not more seriously hurt than this. After the shot went off, my training took over. I called my parents to let them know what had happened. I called 911. I dressed my wound and had the bleeding stopped before the paramedics actually arrived at the gun range. The reason that I share this is because negligent discharges happen. And I don't want them to happen to anybody else. I consider myself to be a very safe and responsible gun owner. And I have done that draw stroke thousands of times with no problem. Things just tend to happen. I just hope that they never happen to me again, and I hope that they never happen to you. As always, God bless all my sportsmen of America. Join the NRA to protect our rights. Please check out my friends over at legallyconcealed.org. Thank you very much to those of you involved in law enforcement and those of you served in the military. And thanks for watching Tex Grabner Outdoors.
That moment was brought to you by the world-famous Tex Grabner. They now have Grabnerization as a description of anything that's really screwed up beyond human description. Thanks, Tex. We really appreciate that.
Think about how you look to others. This week on The Legal Brief, we're going to discuss a concept attorneys call jury appeal. What I refer to it as is, think about how you look to others. If you carry a firearm for self-defense, and you're called upon to use it in self-defense, a lot of questions are going to be asked about you personally. As you may be aware from recent trials, this can get very deep into what you wear, where you go, and your personal opinions. I advise my clients to be careful about the image they present, because everything that they do now may become fodder for a jury of 12 individuals. Wearing shirts with slogans that you might not necessarily want others to see, bumper stickers that advise political positions that are somewhat unpopular, or that suggest you might be a violent individual, should be avoided if you don't want a jury to consider that. Remember, even though a jury is going to see you at your best, in a suit, cleaned up, with a haircut, and your attorneys are going to do their best to make you look like a regular person, if the image the world had of you for years ahead of time is something other, the jury may not believe that you acted in self-defense. Always be careful about the image you present in public through your words, your clothing, your actions, and the way you present yourself to others.
It's really important you get in the habit of finding the game with your binoculars. Looking for animals through your telescopic sight is not acceptable. To be an effective hunter, you don't put your body into a spot that your eyes haven't been before. That's when game just leaves and you never get to see them. One of the things that's really changed in my lifetimes is good optics are now very affordable. A pair of binoculars, whether they're small ones that you have in your pocket and instant to hand, or the larger pair in your pack, will save you many miles of boot leather and allow you to travel places that you haven't been yet and to get there before the game knows you're there. It's really important you get in the habit of finding the game with your binoculars. Looking for animals through your telescopic sight is not acceptable. If there's anything that makes me mad is to be looking through my binoculars and see somebody staring at me through their telescopic sight. Absolutely unacceptable. It's not done. You can't aim the gun at anybody. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. Another thing that's really available now, and again very affordable, is the laser rangefinder. These are under $500 now, have an effective range of past 1,000 yards. They are 6-power magnification in this model. It allows you to know the exact distance to your target. It's a programmable unit. I can put in the ballistics for the round that I'm carrying in my rifle, and it's going to show me bullet drop for angles, also for elevation for when you're shooting uphill or downhill, and the exact range to the target. Knowing this increases your chances of making a clean shot. You should understand your ballistics really well. The rifle should be zeroed and you should know the drop. On mine, I like to put a little chart on the base of the gun, and I can refer instantly once I know my distance to the elevations necessary to hold over on the target. Another very, very important thing in safety is something like this. In the state of Nevada, we don't have to wear the hunter's orange vest, not required by law. However, think that you're carrying out the head of the elk that you just shot with this beautiful set of antlers on it, and you're all dressed in camo, and all that goon up on the hill looking at you through his rifle scope sees is a big rack, and he takes a shot. If this is hanging over the rack of the animal, he's probably going to be less inclined to shoot. Protect yourself. If you're ever carrying an animal mount, any part of it, make sure it's covered in bright orange so somebody doesn't mistake it for a game animal and shoot you instead.
More discussion on guns, politics, and self-defense when we come back on Fired Up.
When we started this movement many, many years ago, we had one constitutional carry state, and we now have 4. And those states have not had spikes in crime. In fact, they've had reductions.
And we are back. In the first 2 segments today, we talked about some obvious reasons why some of the 3,000 people in the Navy Yard needed a firearm. And I expect we might see the same in one of the new Starbucks gun-free zones sooner or later. I think there's a need for people to be able to carry defensive firearms where they need to go, where they want to go. And we're going to discuss that in this segment about why you should carry and if you should carry.
I think we live in such a scary time right now, and just at the very base of it, the bad guys have guns, and we are very lucky that we have the right to protect ourselves. And I understand, because I have friends that are both, pro-gun and anti-gun, and what I say to my friends that aren't comfortable with it, you're not doing yourself any favors or anyone that you could potentially have to protect in the future by not having a firearm. You not having a gun and taking a stance against it doesn't put you at an advantage to protect yourself or anyone around you. And things are scary, and kids don't play outside like they used to, and times have changed. And I don't understand why anyone would want to put themselves at a disadvantage and know that other bad guys have the guns and not want to do anything and express that right.
Well, look at all the people that could be alive today because they never had the opportunity, or in some cases regulations prohibited them from defending themselves, from carrying a gun. I mean, getting back to the Navy Yard thing.
There's 12 of them right there.
And there's 12 of them right there. We had the IHOP thing up in Carson City up here. I mean, these people, for regulation-wise, they would all be, a lot of them would be alive today because of that.
It's a matter of conjecture, actually, because even if those 12 people, I mean, if you look at the number of people who actually legally can carry firearms, there's nothing to say that one of those 12 people would have been armed. But somewhere in that mix of humanity there might have been somebody that could have stopped it. But if you look nationally and you look at the number of defensive gun incidents that occur in the United States, I don't think that most people understand how many incidents there are where armed citizens actually do defend themselves. That doesn't it doesn't mean that they killed somebody, or they even shot somebody.
Just the mere presence of a firearm could stop a situation.
It's probably saved untold numbers of lives by people that have taken on the responsibility, and it is a responsibility.
And things like that are difficult to track and report and document. Because a lot of times they're not reported at all. Right. And so it's a very difficult thing, but I agree, there's probably thousands upon thousands of cases that never hit the newspapers, never hit the media, where a gun has helped someone stay alive and protect themselves.
I've this happened just about 2 weeks ago. I was having coffee, not at Starbucks, I might say. I was having coffee, and the person it was a business associate, and we were talking about weapons and my past as a police officer, and the individual said something, well, at least you're not carrying a gun now. And I said, of course I'm carrying a gun. And they said, why would you carry a gun now? You're retired. But you know what? You give so many years of service, your responsibilities don't end simply because you're no longer active duty. If I couldn't live with myself, if I had the possibility of saving someone's life and I didn't prepare myself to do it by simply being armed.
And we've seen those stories over and over again. There's a young lady who, in the Luby's cafeteria shooting, this is going back 20 some odd years, maybe more now, who testified to Congress about how she watched her mother and father get shot to death because she followed Texas's law at that time. Even though she had a legally owned firearm, she left it in the car because she couldn't take it into a private business. You know,
Hey, I'm carrying a gun right now. You know, I mean, I'm sorry.
You have a problem.
I know, I do. I'm sorry.
you know, I hate to quote a movie as if it's reality, but every now and then movies capture reality. And in the Western Unforgiven, there's a scene where the deputies are all gearing up to go and take the guns away from English Bob, and one of the deputies has got one arm and he's got 5 or 6 firearms he's loading up, and one of the others says, well, why, you only got one arm, what do you need more? He goes, I ain't gonna die for lack of shooting back. And I think that's the simple answer. You never know when an attack is gonna come. I've never been in a situation where I got up in the morning and said, I think I'll be robbed today because of where I'm going, I'll take a gun. You know, so
Statistically, it's not, it's very, very rare that you would be in that situation.
And of course, the argument the other side has always made as well, if we allow all these guns out there, started in Florida and has moved through the country as we've gone to more and more open carry and more CCW states, it'll be the Wild West. We'll have shootings in the street. And that just hasn't proven out.
It hasn't proven out.
When we started this movement many, many years ago, we had 1 constitutional carry state. And we now have 4, and those states have not had spikes in crime. In fact, they've had reductions. And something most people don't realize is crime has been falling for 20, 25 years now.
Except in Chicago.
Media coverage
Except in 4 or 5 cities, major cities. If you take them out, we actually fall way down in the world
Right,
rankings.
and those
of
major
violence.
and those cities where the crime rates have been, especially the violent crime rates, have been rising, are those that have the strictest gun
Yes,
laws
absolutely.
in the country.
Because the victims don't shoot back. So you have more criminal activity. I mean, we look at the American people, and they will, if they're capable, jump in and help. We just had a thing on TV news this morning, I believe it was, that some guy fell onto the railroad tracks in New York, and 4 or 5 people jumped down in the pit to get him out before the train ran over him. They risked their lives to help a guy they didn't even know. And people do that in this country. They will jump in and help.
Absolutely.
And it's the reason most people get into police work that become policemen. And to deny the ability for citizens to carry like that is just criminal. I mean, this goes back to the same thing happening at the Navy Yard. The Marines couldn't carry guns, etc. And we see it over and over again, and it doesn't work. What works is honest people having firearms, soldiers being armed, so they can defeat the bad guys, and they do.
While we're on that subject, we would be remiss if we didn't say something about how the government has denied benefits to the victims at the Fort Hood shooting because they call it workplace violence instead of the terrorism that it truly was.
Even after a trial.
It's unconscionable that our politicians don't step up and order that these people get the just compensation that they are due, and it's a national shame.
Folks, I want to thank you for watching one more time. We will be back at the same time, same station, 7 days from today. Have a great afternoon.